with the numbing behaviors, so, whether it's scrolling or alcohol or food or whatever, what I find is that there's two different modes. It's the same behavior, but they can either be a life enhancer or they can be really detrimental and numb things.
And that vicious cycle of when you numb, you get less connected with yourself, you're less and less self-aware, and then it's harder and harder to break this cycle.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Dr. Becc is a mindset coach and medical doctor who specialises in liberating driven professional women from the limitations of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing. She's basically the cheat code for getting out of your own way, showing up authentically, and living a life you're proud of.
And Kristeen is a medical educator and nephrologist who creates resources for doctors in training that I truly think are an unfair advantage. She makes complex topics super simple and takes the pain and uncertainty out of passing your medical exams. Kristeen and I connected a few years ago via our online platforms, and over the years we've discussed countless highs, lows, and in-betweens of doctor life. And in doing so, we've experienced firsthand the power of vulnerable conversations to show us where we're getting in our own way and underestimating our capacity.
So we want you to be part of the conversation and experience these same results. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. Welcome everyone to the poddy, our beautiful friends, our doctor humans. And today's episode is about something that is so close to my heart right now. And I just wonder if you have either gone through something similar very recently, or you're just in a continuous cycle of going through it like I am, I must say. So today we're going to be talking about numbing behaviors and what you can do to not engage in the numbing behaviors. What would you say, Becc? Not that you wouldn't engage in them, but become consciously aware of them, take back control, and actually control how you feel, control your own well-being.
I actually think this is an addictive habit or behavior that needs to be broken. I think it's a cycle that we create that needs to be broken. And I think that's why, I expect for the rest of my life, over the course of my life, I will continue to fall into these patterns again because, our bodies, we're just always trying to move towards what's pleasurable. We're trying to move away from what's painful or uncomfortable and do it in the most efficient way possible. And because of that, so much of our life is difficult, especially as doctors, made even more difficult by this really abnormal, unsuited healthcare system that we're working in terms of it being really unsuited to thriving humans. And so in the course of us trying to show up in these challenging situations, I think it's normal that we end up creating a lot of discomfort in our lives, and we end up feeling very time scarce, very exhausted with all of that, that with this tendency, it's so easy for us to start to make these quick sort of grabs towards feeling better or not feeling so bad, feeling a little bit worse, and doing that by numbing out. And when we repeat this enough times, when we become so, when we have these back-to-back days and back-to-back weeks, back-to-back months for some of us, where we don't really get enough time to stop and pause and think about what's the next best thing for us. It's so easy for us to fall into these cycles of doing what will make us feel better, the quickest and the easiest, what seemingly costs us the less and the least amount of time and energy resources. And so I think, battling with and trying to starve off and not fall into these traps of these numbing behaviors, I think it will be something that we will need to consciously work on for the rest of our lives. I think it's just so human. And I think clinicians are particularly poised to want to reach for these numbing reliefs in our very difficult lives. So yeah, I think it's more about, I love everything you said, but I really want to highlight this as being something that's quite addictive these patterns that we develop. And with that, cycles that need to be very consciously broken.
Yes. And that's why we want to talk about it today, because I had this experience on the weekend that I'm going to tell you about, but I have now consciously decided that I need to overcome this and I want to take charge of this situation. So I woke up on Saturday morning, and of course, the first thing I did was I was on the Voxer to Becc, telling her about all my dramas and how I was feeling that day. But I was in a bit of a heap. And what had happened was Saturday was my first day off in quite a long time. I'd had a lot of clinical load over the last month, and I had been running courses, and I really hadn't stopped. And I was onboarding a new member of staff. There was just all this stuff going. And it was like push, 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 get to the end of the week. Can anyone relate to that feeling of just getting to Saturday? That's just the basics, just get there, right? You don't know what's going to happen there. But then I woke up on Saturday thinking, well, this is my first day off in ages. This is going to be great. I'm going to have a day off. But instead of feeling like, oh, I've got a day off and I feel whimsical, I felt this sense of deep agitation. Like I did not want to be with myself. And I was finding that I just felt uncomfortable in my body and just totally wired. It was like I'd forgotten how to relax. And the only thing I could think to do was to pick up my phone and scroll, or turn on the TV and watch like mindless YouTube videos, which is basically what I've been doing all week at night when I was pushing through. And I just had to stop myself in the moment and be like, no, that is not the answer. And I want to feel good, but equally I wanted to escape from myself. And I was chatting to you about it, Becc, and I was like, oh, help me. But then I consciously decided no more. I'm going to get back to baseline. I'm going to recalibrate. And because past me, who wasn't really in this cycle of kind of neglecting myself and ignoring myself and hitting the override button all the time, I do have like a self-care toolkit that I know works. I know it works, and I'm sure we're going to share it here on the pod very, very soon. Probably in the next episode, actually, we'll be diving into that in a bit more detail. But I have these techniques, I know they work. And for some reason recently, it's like I've just felt like I haven't had enough time to put them into practice. I've been deprioritizing them, deprioritizing myself. And then I've ended up in this kind of cycle where instead of self-care, I've been just doing these numbing behaviors. And for me, it's been very digital, the scrolling, the YouTube watching. But I think for other people, it might be other things like eating. Food can be like this, or alcohol, of course, right? So I guess I just wanted to highlight this problem because it was something that really bothered me on the weekend. And I feel like if I hadn't had that self-care toolbox already established, and if I didn't have insight into this, then what would have happened is I would just have kept rolling with that agitation, and I would just have kept using the numbing behavior. But I was able to pause, stop, and then I ended up meditating and then exercising. And it didn't fully fix me. It did sort of reset my nervous system, I would say. And then for the rest of the day, it made me able to enjoy my day. And I did not touch my phone again, unless it was to speak to someone, like connect with family, like a message, or messages and voice memos and things like that were okay, but I was not on Instagram, I wasn't on any social media, and it was so enriching. And so I feel like there's a lot in there to unpack. Becc, what comes up for you in response to that story?
Well, actually, the first thing that people should know is my response to Kristeen's Voxer messages on the weekend were, oh my gosh, me too. Guilty as charged. Oh, it just resonated so much. And, I used to think that once I knew myself and once I got my life together, once I got my routines and I was doing the ideal work and the ideal work schedule for me, and once I had enough time and once I had control of my time, that this wouldn't be a problem for me anymore. That I would, naturally, we're not forced by, outside work schedules or whatever constructs, whatever restrictions there are in, our general lives. I thought that once I got those restrictions out of the way, that what my body would naturally do is what's good for me all the time, that I would have these natural desires when I had enough time. Time's probably the main thing. When I had enough time, once I had control over my time, that I would naturally do these things that are good for me and that feel good, after you do them, the meditation, the exercise, and even during when you're doing them. But instead, what I found is, our minds just can so easily get confused about what is good for us. What we have a desire to do, that emotion comes from our perception of that activity. Again, very simply, is that activity going to bring me more pain, more pain, or more pleasure? Is that activity going to bring me closer to my goals or further away from my goals? And what I noticed happened to me in this situation, where over the past couple of weeks, I have been deprioritizing all these activities that I usually use to connect with myself, things like exercising really regularly, meditating, journaling, even just feeling my emotions. Those things I had deprioritized from the thought of, I want to get more work done. I want to use this time to work more. For you guys, you might see these thoughts come up as, I should take that extra shift, or I should stay late to finish this piece of work. I should finish these letters now, or I should do these letters tonight instead of next week at work. For me, it was a time scarcity, and then these very responsible and praiseworthy sounding thoughts of, I want to use this time to do more work, so I'm going to do more work instead of doing these, let's just call them self-care activities. And the result of that was, after letting my mind roll with that reasoning for a couple of weeks on end, I'd fallen out of being able to take care of myself when I wasn't feeling good, and therefore resorting to numbing. In those weeks where I would choose to work instead of maybe meditating instead, because I had been disconnecting with myself, I had been more likely to numb when my body was saying, wait, slow down. We want to rest, or we want a bit of cognitive space. We want a bit of blank space to just think and catch up on the day and take stock of what's happening and think about the future. I was saying, no, we're gonna keep working, hit the override button, and basically numb that wanting from my body. So yes, I am in the same situation as well, and I had to do a lot of intentional work on the weekend. Well, not a lot of intentional work. I had to do a bit of intentional work on the weekend to get out of what has become a numbing cycle for me over the last few weeks as well. So I guess what we really wanted to do first was normalize this. When we fall out of our good habits, the first tendency that my mind has had over the years has been to judge myself. And I'll say something to myself, silently my mind will say, you've gone backwards. That's what my mind will make it mean. You've gone backwards. As if there's some kind of definitive verdict that can be drawn about these couple of weeks in my life, about who I am as a person and my overall trajectory, instead of recognizing, the way that Kristeen talks about this problem is, she's noticed that she's fallen out of good habits, and simply that, I need to reinstate these habits. I need to reinstall these habits again so that then they become my new normal. And it's that simple, which is very different to what my mind would tend to do, which is be like, oh no, I've gone backwards. Something's going very wrong here, and something's wrong with me in terms of my discipline. And with that, I can say, and that means, I'm not a very hardworking person. I'm not a very disciplined person, and therefore I'm not going to achieve my dreams into the future. This is my catastrophizing brain. Luckily, with mind management, with this mindset coaching work that I've done, I'm able to break those cycles. So I really want you guys to be aware if your mind draws these overgeneralized, catastrophizing verdicts about when you're not, doing these, quote, basic habits as well.
And you can see what a vicious cycle that is, because from that place of like, oh, you've gone backwards, you've let yourself go, love. I feel like that just would encourage me to numb again. Do you know what I mean? Like, well, that's good. I don't feel good about that, so now I'm going to numb extra.
Exactly.
But
It creates more of a problem. And that's exactly the problem that I would fall into. So I would, it would be what would otherwise be a couple of weeks of me deprioritizing these healthy habits that I have would then turn into, double that time instead of what we did now, what we can do now, which is the moment you get awareness of it, the moment you shine awareness of it, then we start to turn in a different direction. As opposed to me back then, I would get awareness of, me doing poorly with these negative habits. And then I would judge myself more, which would make me feel worse, which would make me want to numb more, as you're saying. And then I would double the time before I would climb out of that hole. So this doesn't need to be a big dramatic life change. As Kristeen was saying, and what you guys might find too, is that you already actually have the toolbox. And for the first step for a lot of you guys, like the first step for me was to not allow myself to judge myself, to not allow myself to stack more negative emotions and difficult experiences on top of this, but just to meet yourself where you're at, so then you can start using that toolbox that you already have, because you're an awesome human who's been adapting and tackling this problem in the past.
yeah, I love that so much. And what fascinates me is that with the numbing behaviors, so, whether it's scrolling or alcohol or food or whatever, like what I find is that there's two different modes. It's the same behavior, but they can either be a life enhancer or they can be really detrimental and numb things. And so whether they're good for you or bad for you. So if I start off in a high vibe mood and I'm completely aligned and I'm happy and I engage in scrolling or watching YouTube or whatever it is, it doesn't affect me at all in a negative way, or I don't really notice it because I've got such a buffer of well-being. But if I am low and I have been neglecting myself, and then I'm in that kind of state where I'm reaching for it as a numbing behavior to feel better, it does distract me temporarily, but it definitely doesn't make me feel better in between times. It doesn't make me like the person that I want to be. It doesn't give me the life experience I want. And it just makes me crave it more, because I guess it is addicting, isn't it? These things are quite addictive. But I think there's something to be said for understanding the state of mind that you're in before you engage in these behaviors. Like understand why you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, what would you say to that, Becc?
Yeah, and I would say we've got a really good structure that we use in Dare Darling for this when we're talking about, using our thoughts intentionally. There's no such thing as positive thoughts or negative thoughts, for the purposes of coaching. There's just thoughts that you find useful or not. And the way that you work out, for example, here, the thought of, I want to get some more work done. That's not necessarily a positive or a negative thought. But the way that I work out if I want to keep thinking that is looking at the outputs of those thoughts. So I talk about your emotions and behaviors as being the outputs of your thoughts. So a thought creates an emotion, it affects your body. When you have a thought and you think about something, when I think I want to get some more work done, it affects my body. And the way that it affects my body, the emotion that it creates, or whatever nervous system activation happens from that perception, then drives the behavior. That's the emotion, its Latin origins, breaks down to movere, outwards movement is what that means. So the whole idea is that emotions drive what we do, including changing the way we think. I'm sure you've had the experience of, feeling overwhelmed as an emotion. Suddenly you can't think straight. So if you take the thought, I want to do some more work, and this is a really interesting thing and why there are no shortcuts here. You have to be able to practice self-awareness in the moment. On some days, the thought, I want to do some more work, creates a positive emotion for me. But I know over the last couple of weeks, I want to do some more work came from this scarcity. It was kind of like the end of the sentence was actually, I want to do some more work because I haven't done enough. That was actually a thought. So the thought that was driving my numbing behavior was probably, I haven't done enough work, or maybe even I need to do more work. And I feel this in my chest right now as I think that thought, and I transport myself back to that time. I need to do more work. Oh, it's like, it probably feels close to fear, actually. And with that fear in my body, I want to, like any other human, I don't want to feel that fear, because that fear is triggering off this whole other reaction in my body saying there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem, do something. And when there's nothing to do, when there's nothing that can be done, or when I just want to not feel that fear, I can numb to lessen that fear. And I call this softening, when you will take, food or wine or something like that. They're common things, will soften the feeling of that emotion by stacking on top these pleasurable activities or things that we can do. So then obviously distraction is another one that we commonly use, like watching TV. And what Kristeen was saying here was, these behaviors aren't inherently bad. I don't think about watching TV as a bad thing in my life, as a bad habit, as a bad activity. I don't even think about drinking alcohol as a bad thing to do in my life. And I certainly don't think about eating food as a bad thing. But it's, as Kristeen was saying, it's about the driver behind that behavior. Because I can choose to watch TV from love for myself, or from excitement, from this positive place. And in that experience of indulging in that, whatever I'm watching and enjoying it, whether it's expanding my mind or just entertaining and creating humor and amusement, we can create more loveliness with that. That can actually rejuvenate me, energize me. It can be something very positive in my life. But when you're doing it from a place of trying to escape a negative emotion, then generally what you find is it only creates more of a negative experience in your life. When you are choosing a behavior from a place of trying to escape yourself, not only does it usually create a more negative experience in your life, but it also means that you escape the reality of what you're going through right now. And you're choosing to disconnect from yourself instead of connect with your current experience. In that case, for me, the cost for me is, if I choose to numb out and watch TV, or even just obey the thought and continue to like overwork to kind of get rid of that fear, to numb out that fear, because I'm like, I want the fear to quiet down, so I'm just going to do the thing that will apparently make the fear go away. Let me just tell you, it didn't. I just kept thinking, I want to get some more work done. But when I choose to act from those emotions and numb out the emotions, I also rob myself of the opportunity to be like, why am I feeling this fear? What's going on here? And actually seeing that it's coming from this false thought of believing that I need to work more, and that's going to be the most productive thing for me at the time. So there is this behavior of numbing. It takes a lot of self-awareness to recognize, because you can't see it in just a behavior. Numbing is really a response to an emotion. And so you've got to be able to turn to yourself in the moment and say, where is this behavior coming from? Am I choosing this glass of wine because, like, from a positive place, or am I choosing it from a place of numbing? And it just highlights the importance of self-awareness. And again, that vicious cycle of, when you numb, you get less connected with yourself, you're less and less self-aware. And then it's harder and harder to break this cycle.
Oh, this resonates so much. And I love what you were saying there. Yeah, numbing is about disconnecting from yourself rather than connecting with yourself. But what was so true for me, it's so palpable just from my experience on the weekend, is that when you have repeatedly disconnected from yourself and you've gone, I'd say, quite far from yourself, I think that truly was my experience on the weekend. There was an agitation in my body. I was disconnected from myself. I feel like my body was screaming at me to pay it some attention and do some of the things that make it feel good. And I was like, no, this is terrible. I want to be away from you. Stop making me feel bad. And the tension there was, I wanted to engage in the numbing behavior still. But in truth, when sort of deciding to reconnect and do something different, it was like unpleasant. Like I had to then sit with my body quietly and listen to it and soothe it and do something. Like the pushing through, going from the disconnected craving, the numbing behavior, whatever it is. I think that craving is very unpleasant in and of itself. And it's like an itch you're not allowed to scratch if you've consciously decided to reconnect with yourself. But I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a discomfort from going between those two modes. And once you're beyond the discomfort, you're going to be so glad you did it. And you can reset your whole self, your whole nervous system. But it wasn't pleasant to do that, to make the choice to do that. Or have you had that experience, Becc?
Oh, completely. It gets worse first. There are so many good things that are good for you that feel worse at first. And knowing the difference between things that feel bad that are good for you and things that feel bad because they're bad for you is such a key skill, isn't it? And again, it's just coming back to that self-awareness. And you just highlighted how, this is not uncommon for clinicians need to hit the override button to get through the week. It is so common not to get through the 12-day week that we so commonly have. And not only does that mean you're accumulating these unmet needs, maybe you needed more sleep, but instead you hit the override button and decided to work instead. Maybe, you were feeling some kind of sadness or grief related to something tragic that so commonly happens to our patients. We face this so frequently in our day that we can be normalized to it and just sort of shush those negative emotions that come up and, numb them, of course, just to get through, just to be able to care for the next patient. So you've got these accumulating unmet needs. So by the time your body gets to that Saturday, there's so many things that your body wants. And then also to make this even harder, we've practiced this numbing behavior. We've practiced over this time, this period of hitting the override button. We've practiced that whenever our body shouts out, I want something, I need something, something's not right, we practiced ignoring that, dismissing that, distracting that. And so then it gets to the Saturday and it's screaming again. You're like, well, I know what to do to feel better in this moment. Numb. Just that's what, that's what you practice. And then we need to remember again, I've got time now. I've got time to be with myself. I haven't got another patient waiting for me afterwards. I haven't got to just close my eyes and get to sleep because I have to wake up early the next morning to do yet another day. I haven't got to get to my emails or finish this task. I've got time now. And you need to teach your body again on Saturday. You have time to connect with yourself. And so that's another barrier, that habit that you've practiced over that period. And then, as you're saying, the final barrier, which I think is one of the toughest, but it's also just something to remember, is it gets worse first. This is one of those things that it gets worse first. And when you're at that point where everything feels terrible and because you've got those cumulative needs and you've practiced numbing instead of connecting, you've practiced disconnecting instead of connecting, then to lean into something that's only going to make you feel worse than you currently feel is the last thing you want to do. So again, this is why it really is something that needs to be consciously, purposefully broken. And it's also why it's such an easy cycle for us to fall into, because every time we dismiss ourselves, every time over the week we hit the override button, the needs accumulate and the trust with ourselves deteriorates a little bit. And, this is not avoidable for us as clinicians. I don't expect that we can go through the week perfectly meeting all of our needs and attending to, everything that our body and nervous system wants at all times. It's just not the reality of the work that we do. And so we actually need to get really skilled at meeting ourselves in this challenging position and giving ourselves the grace to recognize we've been there without criticizing ourselves, like my past self. And then also a lot of patience and encouragement and support to break that kind of 3 layers of the challenge that this is.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, it made me feel as if it's actually quite a good thing to make a plan. So I had mentioned earlier, and you also mentioned, that we have our go-to things that we know retune us, help to make us feel better, and they're going to be different for everyone, and I'm sure you'll have your own. But on Saturday, as well as having that feeling of not wanting to do it because I had to spend time with myself and I was trying to escape from myself, I genuinely had a feeling of like anhedonia, like as if like, oh, I don't enjoy any things anymore. Which sounds comical to say out loud, but I was like, I don't like singing anymore. I don't like art anymore. None of this is true. I was like singing yesterday.
Can we just stop on that? Can we just stop on that? Because that is so profound. My mind says the most dramatic thoughts like that as well. And I believe it in the moment, right? I literally I wrote down verbatim on Saturday when I was coming out of this myself, I feel like a failure. And I read that and I was like, no, I don't. But that's what my brain was saying. That's what was, it's just, it doesn't resonate when I say the words, but it was right there under my awareness. And I can imagine my mind was kind of like chanting this mantra of every time, something little went wrong or whatever, it's because I'm failing. Oh, or it's because, the world is a terrible place and I don't enjoy anything anymore. But I wanted to stop on that because yes, you're not clinically depressed. Like you hear anhedonia, you're like, I could never be thinking that because I'm not depressed. But when these thoughts are in your mind, when they affect your body, when the thoughts are in your mind, they affect your body. And a whole critical part and the reason why coaching is so impactful is because it makes you aware of these thoughts that you ironically would think, I could never be thinking that. That's not me. I'm not clinically depressed. I'm not whatever. I don't think I'm a failure. No, but it helps you see these thoughts that you would never think you're having, but you are having. They're just sentences floating in your mind and your mind sees them and it's affected by them. And so just don't underestimate the dramatic and catastrophizing nature of our minds. And also, just because it's not a part of your identity, recognize that those thoughts, those perspectives of the world, those ideas floating around your mind can very much affect how you feel and therefore affect your energy and therefore affect your motivation and therefore affect what decisions you make about how to treat yourself in the moment. So I just wanted to highlight that and also say like, hey, this is my brain is very dramatic when left unsupervised. Like it's just worried. It's worried about, things going wrong. And for most of us, that is how our brains function. They are afraid. They're constantly trying to predict bad things happening so that they can prevent them. So I wouldn't be surprised if almost all of you found really dramatic thoughts in your mind like this too. And when you can give them attention, that's when you can laugh at them and be like, what the heck? Like, bye. Like, I don't need to think that again today because I've just remembered I really don't believe that.
It is funny though, isn't it? Like your brain's having some kind of temper tantrum and you're just kind of listening to it and watching it have its little meltdown. And there's this other part of you that's like, what is wrong with you? That's not how we do it.
I wish you could have seen Kristeen's face throughout that, guys, because I'm sitting here talking about like, I'm thinking I'm a failure. And Kristeen's here like with the biggest smile on her face laughing at me because she's literally like, yeah, it's ridiculous. You don't think that. I know you don't think that. But that's the effect of like when you just give yourself a minute, look at your brain. These like actually very dark thoughts are ironically laughable sometimes. You just need a moment to be like, the heck, brain, I thought you were on my team.
It's so funny, but just so relatable. And we really hope that by listening to our, I guess, authentic, what would you call it, Becc, Saturday experience, that it helps you in some way to identify with where this is showing up for you. Are you disconnecting from yourself rather than connecting with yourself? Are you engaging in behaviours in order to numb that discomfort within yourself? Have you been pushing the override button all week and then continuing to press it on the weekend, trying to escape from yourself? We feel you. This is completely normal, but we hope that we've given you some ideas to, I guess, unlock that reconnection with yourself, because from that place, all of these numbing behaviours, you could engage in them till the cows come home, you'll be fine. Get to that place. That's a better place.
And I think something that you said at the start of the episode would be really good to circle back to, because you know, when you're in that place, so, you know, you've got those 3 barriers that are in your way of stopping disconnecting and starting to reconnect with yourself again, stopping the numbing and starting to actually serve yourself again. And Kristeen said at the start, you know, I did the things, I think it was exercising and meditating, and you're like, it didn't fix it. I didn't feel completely better. And that is the truth of it. That is what we're facing here. We don't get to come out of this week of hitting the override button and neglecting ourselves and do a couple of activities and suddenly feel better. Unfortunately, I think this is sort of the price that we pay of living this lifestyle. You know, it's the price that we pay of neglecting ourselves. And I just hope that you're all doing it for reasons that you really love, you know, because you've got a mission in life, because you want to serve patients, because you want to change the healthcare system, or because you want to show up for your family, whatever it is. You know, there's no right or wrong here. But we want to create some desire to do these good things for ourselves again, to stop the numbing and start to reconnect with ourselves, even when we're not going to get this massive reward. You know, we're going to feel a little bit better. And to recognize that that's just the first step on getting back to reconnecting with yourself again. That's the necessary first step. And think about the alternative. If on this Saturday, if I choose to continue this numbing pattern, what's that going to cost me? If I continue to be a person who every time I feel a negative emotion, I do something to escape that, what do I miss out on because of that? If I'm so uncomfortable with myself because I've had a hard week, yeah, I'm exhausted, yeah, I'm uncomfortable just being with myself right now. If I continue to distract myself with my phone all day, if I continue to distract myself with television, if I distract myself with or soften those feelings with alcohol or with food, what situation are you going to end up in 24 hours, right? We deserve so much better than that, especially after the hard work that you've done. So although the rewards don't seem that sparkly and exciting, to do that first meditation after a week off or after 3 months off, the rewards don't seem that high. Remember, the alternative can cost you a lot. And maybe from that perspective too, you can think about how, you know, not just the fact that you'll feel a little bit better after doing the meditation, a little bit better, but you can also think about how you've just rescued yourself from continuing to dishonor yourself and disconnect from yourself. And that is worth so much.
But yeah, well, that's right. Exactly. And I'm glad you said that, because yeah, it didn't make me feel like, my goal is always to feel my best self, which is how I'd probably say I feel today and even yesterday. But even Saturday night before I went to bed, I felt recalibrated. And it was almost like that one little shift and the step in the right direction enabled me to live my life in a different way on Saturday. Like it's hard to explain. Like it just allowed me to continue to choose the next best behavior that was gonna get me there subconsciously. And then by the time I went to bed on Saturday night, I did feel much better. It was, yeah. So I think it's a pathway to something, whereas the numbing behavior is not a pathway to anywhere. It's just a pathway to the numbing behavior again and again and again. So I think you're choosing a step in the right direction when you choose to reconnect, and then a lot of it kind of unfolds naturally from there, is my experience.
That is something actually to really look forward to and be motivated by. You do it once and then it's easier the next time. It's like going to the gym. You do it once and it's easier the next time. Yeah. And that is really worth, like, if you can put your attention on that as a form of motivation, that's compelling to me.
And I'm actually really excited because we have another episode coming up soon where we are going to talk about self-care in a new way. And we're going to be sort of unveiling our favorite self-care techniques that take no time at all. And they might even give you back time in your day. Sounds too good to be true. But if that sounds like something you need in your life, definitely tune in next week.
Yeah, this is basically self-care for doctors who don't have time for the the meditation retreats.
It's the truth, y'all. Thanks for listening. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there